If you're over 60 and feel like your midsection is changing shape no matter what you do, you're not alone. It's not a lack of willpower, it's biology, and biology can be understood and worked with. Before we start, an important note. I'm not a doctor and this isn't medical advice. What follows is based on published nutrition research, but research evolves, results vary from person to person, and some of the points below rest on stronger evidence than others. I'll tell you which is which as we go. If you find this useful, a subscribe helps me keep making this kind of content. But first, let's focus on what actually matters: understanding your body. Why belly fat changes after 60. Not all the fat that settles around the waist as we age is the same. Some sits just under the skin, the kind you can pinch. But another kind, called visceral fat, sits deeper, wrapped around internal organs like the liver, pancreas, and intestines. You can't always see it from the outside, and someone can carry a lot of it without looking overweight. This type of fat isn't passive. Research in physiology shows it releases inflammatory substances, including proteins called cytokines, which can interfere with insulin sensitivity and sustain low-grade inflammation throughout the body. That's part of why high visceral fat levels are linked across many epidemiological studies to a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and other metabolic issues. 3 things largely explain why this fat becomes harder to shift after 60. The first is hormonal. The decline in estrogen and testosterone that comes with menopause and andropause changes how the body distributes fat stores, with a tendency to store more of it around the abdomen rather than elsewhere. The second is chronic low-grade inflammation. This tends to build with age, and it can itself promote fat storage around the belly, creating a bit of a self-sustaining loop. The third is age-related muscle loss, known as sarcopenia. From around 60 onward, people naturally lose some muscle mass each decade if nothing is done to preserve it. Muscle is metabolically active tissue, so less of it often means a slower resting metabolism. The good news is that diet acts directly on all 3 of these levers. Here are 9 foods whose effects on abdominal fat or on the mechanisms behind it have been studied. I'll flag the strength of the evidence each time because I'd rather be straight with you than oversell anything. 1. Avocado. Avocado is rich in oleic acid, a monounsaturated fat similar in composition to olive oil. A review of 28 clinical trials linked higher oleic acid intake to reduced abdominal fat. Some smaller studies have also suggested that 1 avocado a day could reduce visceral fat in overweight women. That said, let's be honest. The largest randomized trial on the topic to date, published in a Journal of the American Heart Association publication and following several hundred participants for 6 months, found no significant reduction in visceral fat volume from adding 1 avocado a day to the usual diet. So, the evidence is mixed. Avocado remains a solid food for its fiber and potassium content, but don't expect a dramatic effect from it alone. Half an avocado in a salad or on whole grain toast is a good habit, just not a standalone miracle. 2. Blueberries. Blueberries are among the fruits richest in anthocyanins, antioxidants from the flavonoid family. Animal studies have shown that rodents fed a blueberry-enriched diet accumulated less visceral fat than animals given the same number of calories without blueberries, suggesting an effect from the compounds themselves rather than calories alone. In humans, the data is more limited but points in a favorable direction. Several small clinical trials have observed improvements in metabolic markers such as insulin sensitivity in people who consume blueberries regularly. About 1 cup a day, fresh or frozen since anthocyanin content is comparable either way, added to yogurt or oatmeal, is a simple way to include them. 3. Fatty fish. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, and herring are the best food sources of long-chain omega-3 fats, EPA and DHA. These fats are among the best documented natural compounds for anti-inflammatory effects, particularly through their ability to reduce production of certain inflammatory cytokines. Studies have also linked regular fatty fish consumption to better insulin sensitivity and, in some trials, to reduced visceral fat measured by imaging. 2 to 3 servings a week matches the most common recommendations. Canned sardines in olive oil are an affordable option and just as valid as fresh fish. 4. Green tea. Green tea contains a catechin called EGCG, one of the most studied compounds in metabolic nutrition. A randomized double-blind trial in Chinese adults with elevated abdominal fat found that a catechin-enriched beverage consumed over 12 weeks significantly reduced visceral fat area compared to a control group. Other trials have shown more modest or null results, particularly at lower catechin doses. Overall, the literature suggests a real but modest effect that depends a lot on dose and consistency. 3 cups of green tea a day, unsweetened over several weeks, is a reasonable and low-risk habit for most adults, but not a standalone fix. 5. Cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and kale share a family of compounds called glucosinolates, which break down during digestion into substances like indole-3-carbinol. These compounds are studied for their role in estrogen metabolism, which is particularly relevant after menopause, when hormonal balance shifts. Direct evidence linking cruciferous vegetables to a measured reduction in visceral fat in humans is still limited, but these vegetables are otherwise very high in fiber and low in calories, making them a solid part of a balanced diet regardless of any specific hormonal effect. 1 serving a day, steamed or roasted, fits easily into most meals. 6. Eggs. Long unfairly criticized over their cholesterol content, eggs have been largely rehabilitated by more recent research. They provide very high-quality protein containing all 9 essential amino acids, which is especially useful after 60 for countering the muscle loss mentioned earlier. Digesting protein costs more energy than digesting carbs or fat, an effect known as the thermic effect of food, and protein also supports longer-lasting fullness. Eggs are also a good source of choline, a nutrient involved in liver metabolism. 2 eggs a day is fine for most healthy adults. If your doctor has given you specific guidance around cholesterol, follow that first. 7. Garlic. Garlic contains a sulfur compound called allicin, released when it's crushed or chopped and left to sit for a few minutes before cooking. Some clinical studies have observed reductions in body weight and, to a lesser extent, abdominal fat in people taking garlic supplements alongside improvements in insulin sensitivity. This is still a fairly small area of research in terms of sample sizes. Garlic remains a safe, inexpensive food to include daily. 2 to 3 fresh cloves, more for its well-documented general cardiovascular benefits than for any guaranteed targeted effect on visceral fat. 8. Legumes, lentils, chickpeas, black beans, and white beans have a low glycemic index, meaning they cause a slow, moderate rise in blood sugar after a meal, with a proportionally smaller insulin response. Several meta-analyses of randomized trials confirm that legumes improve markers of glycemic control like fasting blood sugar and insulin levels. On weight, one meta-analysis of 21 randomized trials found a modest weight loss, on the order of a few hundred grams, associated with regular legume consumption, a real but measured effect, not a dramatic one. Their fiber and resistant starch content also benefits gut bacteria. 1 cup a day in a soup or salad is an achievable target. 9. Extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is a pillar of the Mediterranean diet, the most extensively studied dietary pattern in large-scale nutrition research. It contains a compound called oleocanthal, which has anti-inflammatory properties mechanistically similar to some non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, but without the digestive side effects associated with long-term drug use. The PREDAMNed trial, one of the largest nutrition studies ever conducted, found that a Mediterranean diet enriched with extra virgin olive oil significantly reduced cardiovascular events compared to a low-fat diet, along with favorable effects on several metabolic markers. 2 tablespoons a day, over vegetables or as a dressing, as long as it's genuinely extra virgin and unrefined, since refining strips out many of the active polyphenols. What actually matters here: none of these 9 foods works as an isolated magic fix. What the research shows, taken as a whole, is that a consistent eating pattern, high in fiber, quality protein, monounsaturated fats and omega-3s, and low in ultra-processed foods is fairly consistently linked to better visceral fat management with age. Some foods on this list, like legumes and catechin-rich green tea, have stronger evidence behind them. Others, like avocado and garlic, have more mixed results and are best viewed as useful additions rather than standalone solutions. Physical activity, especially strength training to counter muscle loss and good sleep, matter at least as much as diet alone when it comes to managing visceral fat after 60. If you want a simple starting point, pick 2 or 3 of these foods you don't currently eat regularly, build them into your routine for 3 or 4 weeks, and notice how you feel without expecting an instant transformation. And if you have specific health concerns, especially if you're on medication or managing existing conditions, talk to your doctor before making significant changes to your diet. Thanks for watching. If this was helpful, feel free to subscribe for more.